Dr. Love, you want to get the roll call?
I'll go ahead and get a roll call, Greg. And I'm just gonna, we're gonna abbreviate this so that we can get on with the show. But we have in the studio with us from the Orange County Sheriff's Department, Under Sheriff Mark Canty. Under Sheriff Mark Canty has deep roots in Orange County. Grew up in the Pine Hills area after graduating from Northwestern University in 1994. Under Sheriff Canty came home to Orlando, where he was working in a residential group home for the Urban League. Made him realize that a career in law enforcement was his calling. He's driven by the desire to make a bigger impact in his community, and I can attest to that as well. Canty's hallmark is leadership by example, and that leadership was most spotlighted in June 2016 when a gunman killed 49 people and injured scores more in an act of terror and hate at the Pulse nightclub. As commander of OPD SWAT team, Canty directed team members while they were rescuing survivors and helped ensure no more innocent people were killed. That is the undersheriff. I want to also introduce our chief of police for the Apopka Police Department. The Apopka Police Department is proud to serve our community with a professional law enforcement team of approximately 150 sworn officers and civilians. Chief McKinley joined the Apopka Police Department August 2016, bringing over 3 decades of law enforcement experience to a city he's proud to call home. Greg, do you know where he left to come home to?
Orange County?
Orange County.
Sheriff's Office.
Chief McKinley is a lifelong resident of Orange County. He attended the University of Central Florida, where he obtained his Bachelor's of Science degree in criminal justice. After graduating from the University of Central Florida, by the way, Greg, my wife is a Go Knight as well.
Okay.
Chief McKinley joined the Orange County Sheriff's Department. In his 31 plus years with the Sheriff's Office, Chief McKinley worked his way up through the ranks and eventually became the Chief Deputy. So that is that's the spill on our in-studio folk. But Armando, do we have folk on the line? Okay, Armando got to get it together. So, great. From that perspective, let's go ahead because Chief McKinley, Undersheriff, thank you for being on Let's Talk Nation with Greg and myself. We're going to have some serious conversation. All right, Armando, you're going to keep your job for the day. All right, we appreciate that. But something else that we want to also thank you for is when Greg and I hosted the Community Emergency Forum that took place in Apopka. You guys didn't hesitate. You were there, and not only there to talk about what's taking place in the community as it related to the homicides that were taking place, you addressed a number of other issues, and for that, we are appreciative. And I will say to the listening audience, the response basically your response to citizens of Apopka, and they came from Orlando as well, is it wasn't easy. You took your body shots, but you also stood your position in terms of what the Apopka Police Department is all about, as well as what the Orange County Sheriff's is all about, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
So that folks know that y'all in the studio for real, and that you folk on Facebook, they can see you, but go ahead and say hello to the listening audience.
Hello, listening audience. Glad to be here.
Hello, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
So I guess one of the first questions that a lot of folks want to know, particularly as it relates to law enforcement, is how did you find yourself into this field? What was it that sparked the interest, and how did you get to where you are now?
For me, like Brother Love said, I grew up in Orlando, grew up in Pine Hills. After college, I came back home. I worked for the Urban League dealing with juveniles that had been in trouble, had some arrests.
Undersheriff, pull that mic into you a little bit more, okay? Can you hear him, Armando?
They had been in a little bit of trouble, so my thought was maybe if I could get to them before they got arrested, and the easiest way to do that is to be out on the streets and being able to contact them as a police officer. So,
but that's inspirational, because when you mentioned growing up in Pine Hills, that's one of the areas. Let's be frank in this conversation. That's one of the areas that the need is great there.
Right.
And then Chief McKinley, you spent a number of years in Orange County. You could have easily packed up your tent and moved to North Carolina in a nice cabin and things like that, but you decided that you were going to stick it out, and now you're Chief of Police in Apopka. How did that come about?
Well, just like Under Sheriff Canty. I grew up in Pine Hills. Went to Evans High School, graduated
Yeah, I
from
never
Evans.
knew that.
Yeah, neither
Okay.
did I.
Graduated, I'm not going to tell you the year because then I'll date myself. It was older than what you mentioned a little bit ago for yourself, so I won't mention that. But yeah, and I got into law, law enforcement. My father worked for the Orlando Police Department. He spent 30 years there. I also had an uncle that worked for the Orlando Police Department. He went on to be the Oviedo Police Chief for 10 years. So now I have a son who's a Lake County deputy. So it's sort of
those roots run deep.
Stayed in the family. Love what I do. I love this community. Really have no desire to go anywhere. My wife and I have decided that we're going to stay in the city of Apopka, where we currently live, and the opportunity when it presented itself to become the police chief in Apopka. I'd lived there for 20 years, and the opportunity to come up there and serve the community where I also coach soccer and baseball was a great opportunity that I just couldn't pass.
Wow, Chief, you told us something that we didn't know. I didn't know you grew up in Pine Hills, went to Evans, so man, I tell you, small world. Hey, Armando, do we have our guest on the line? Is Chief Bernie on the line?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'm gonna do a little roll call because we experienced a little technical difficulties. Also, do we have Director Davis on the line with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and also Dr. Nelson, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, well, tell you what, let me go ahead and give props where props are due and give the same type of treatment. We have on the line with us from Fort Pierce Police Department, Chief Diane Hobley Burney. Chief Burney is a 27-year veteran of the Tampa Police Department and the former commander of the Tampa Police Department District 3. She is a graduate of St. Leo University. Chief Hobley earned her master's degree in criminal justice with a concentration in critical incident management. As the commander of the Tampa Police Department Patrol District 3, Chief Barney led 247 officers and 7 civilians as they provided services to a very diverse community, over 77,000 residents and businesses. Chief Burney brings with her strong foundation in community-oriented policing, and she believes in building and maintaining positive relationships within the community through self-initiated proactive measures. That is Chief Burney for the Fort Pierce Police Department. We also have on the line with us from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Department, Mr. Tony Davis, the Director of Police Services with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Director Davis is a graduate of the University of North Florida, where he earned his master's degree in public information. He is also an esteemed member of the International Association of Chief Police. Director Davis proudly served our country for 4 years as an air transportation specialist in the United States Air Force. Subsequently, he began his career with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office in 1986 as a patrol officer. Director Davis was afforded the opportunity to migrate within the agency and work in the Detective Division, SWAT, Vice, Narcotics, and Gun Crimes. In 2015, he was chosen and elevated to serve as the Director of Police Services. Director Davis also received training from the prestigious FBI Law Enforcement Executive Development Association, graduated from the Florida Sheriff's Association Commanders Academy, and his latest achievement was completing the Southern Police Institute 80th Command Officer Development course, in which he graduated in 2018. So those are our law enforcement participants. And Greg, do you have Dr. Nelson? You got Dr. Nelson's information over there?
No, absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, always and never a stranger to the show is Dr. Randy B. Nelson. He's the program coordinator for the Bethune-Cookman University Criminal Justice Administration graduate program. Dr. Nelson's educational background includes a bachelor's in sociology from Eckerd College, a master's of arts in criminology from the University of South Florida, and a PhD in criminology and criminal justice from the Florida State University. His academic and professional career has focused on developing and evaluating delinquency prevention methodologies designed to address the problems negatively impacting disadvantaged communities. Dr. Nelson has an extensive history of working with nonprofit, faith, and community-based social service organizations to develop and effectively achieve their programmatic and outcome goals. He has conducted several presentations and authored numerous reports and publications on the disproportionate representation of minority youth in Florida's juvenile justice system. Dr. Nelson has also served as an adjunct faculty member of Florida A&M University and Florida State University, where he was responsible for the instruction and evaluation of undergraduate and graduate criminal justice students. His work experience includes employment with the Florida Department of Corrections and Juvenile Justice. Dr. Nelson is a nationally recognized law enforcement trainer in the areas of community policing and engagement strategies. Now, Brother Love, it's important that we let everyone know who we have here, because this is not a night where folks should sit back and think that this is just a normal conversation. Right. We have individuals at the top of their agencies in various parts of the state of Florida, and we want to welcome each and every one of them here tonight.
See, that's what, okay, see, keep working on that, Joby. But you know, I want to welcome everybody here once again, because, you know, the issues that we want to have a discussion about this evening are issues that are not just unique to Apopka, not just unique to Orange County. This is, you know, the issues that we're going to be talking about spread throughout the state, and I'm sad to say throughout the country. So with that, Dr. Nelson, because this is the particular area, and Greg rattled off all that you've done, but some of the things that people need to recognize and know. Bethune-Cookman, Dr. Randy Nelson, he was with us in 2016 when we had about 4-5 homicides that was in a short period of time, and at that point in time, we created the Apopka Task Force on Crime, and the Sheriff's Office participated. The Apopka Police Department had a representative on that, and Dr. Nelson, through Bethune-Cookman University and the graduate students, they helped us navigate this process and come up with findings, tangible findings. So we want to have that conversation this evening, and I believe also Dr. Nelson has the graduate students that are going to be our scribes this evening, so that we can take the information that we talk about and publish it, and let's do something with it. Let's just don't have these conversations all the time and leave it on the shelf. So with that, you know, I'm just going to jump off into the conversation. And Greg, if we don't take breaks tonight, I think this is a worthy cause to have that conversation, not to take those breaks. But the first thing that we want to have a conversation about is the two-way accountability between law enforcement and community. When we were in Apopka about a month or so ago in March, we had the conversation about the ownership of what's taking place in communities, not just being shared by law enforcement, but the community taking ownership as well. And so, and Dr. Nelson, I need for you to jump in here with this conversation as well. How do we go about that accountability measure?
Thank you for having us. I think you have a great group of folk on the telephone and in studio. This conversation about accountability, and most folks think accountability is one way, but accountability is two ways. Accountability, the community's accountability to their safety and upkeep, and the law enforcement accountability to the community as well. So two ways, both holding each other and accountable. So I think that's a conversation that we need to have. It's easy to hold someone else accountable, but it's very difficult to have a conversation about each, and that's what we talk about, having a relationship versus an agreement. An agreement, you don't have accountability. A relationship is like a marriage. We hold each other accountable, and we're working towards a common goal. An agreement, you come in when I need you and you get out. It's all transactional. So I think that the conversation we have tonight is about building relationships, and I think the individuals from the law enforcement community they have on the telephone have exhibited that, not only in their profession in terms of where they are, but throughout their careers. So that's why I think it's an excellent conversation about accountability.
Well, I want our law enforcement officials jump in where you see, because I know this past weekend, Jacksonville Sheriff's Department had a community engagement training that took place, and I think Saturday topped it off. So, you know, Director Davis, I mean, you're free to jump in here, as well as Chief Bernie. Y'all not here with us physically, but jump in where, what they say, Greg? Get in where you fit in?
I don't think you want to tell
Not a problem.
No, I think Dr. Nelson is right. You know, when you talk about accountability, it is a two-way street. You know, it's not just on the police, but the public also has a part in that. They have to be accountable as well. And how do we get there? And that starts with communication. You know, we can incorporate a great deal of technology. We can do a lot of wonderful things with technology, but if we don't come together as people and as a law enforcement and as a community and talk and relate and work together, then we're not going to get past this hurdle. You know, we're not going to build trust. We're not going to address the problems that need to be addressed. And we got to have candid and honest conversations on both sides.
Right.
And I concur with all that has been said, because especially here in Fort Pierce, one of the things that we had to address after I became chief was that it is not us against them, because a lot of people have that mentality that it's the community against the police. And they have to understand that we're in this together. To be successful with our crime fighting strategies, with solving crimes, with the number of things, we have to work together, and they have to be a part and take ownership of their neighborhood.
But when Chief McKinley, you mentioned something at the forum that took place back in March, where you started an initiative with your officer, and I don't know if it was particularly in the CRA district, but you spoke about that a little bit at the forum, with officers actually doing more engagement, if you would.
Yeah, we started an initiative. The CRA area covers our part of South Apopka, some of our underprivileged areas of the city of Apopka. And the whole premise behind the whole thing was to get out there and not necessarily get out of your car and ask for ID and their name and date of birth and everything, but get out and get to know the community and just engage them in conversation. You know, I think that one of the things that we need to be a little bit better at, both from the community and law enforcement, is we come together when there's a crisis, but it's during those periods where we don't have a crisis that we need to stay engaged. We do a lot of events in Apopka, South Apopka, North Apopka, everywhere throughout the community. Our coffee with a cop, our cookies and milk with a cop, and everything else. And when we're in a crisis, everybody seems to show up and wants to talk about everything. But it's during those times that we're not in a crisis that we really need to work. Those are the times to build our relationships, not during a crisis. You know, I know that I can come to you or Brother Greg and talk to them at any time, crisis, no crisis, or anything else, but the community needs to engage with us, and we need to engage in the community, not just when we're in a crisis, but when we can get to know each other.
You're right. Speaking of community engagement, just so that everybody who's listening knows and understands, this is not a conversation just between us. Feel free to dial in, area code 407-894-1680. Once again, 407-894-1680.
Yeah, now, one of the things that came out during the conversation that we had for the emergency engagement is that a lot of individuals felt as if law enforcement wasn't listening to them. What are some of the ways, and I know that that in Apopka you do coffee with the cop and different things like that, and I think there's shop with the cop. What are some of the things that law enforcement can do better, or what are some of the things that the community may be able to do better in order to improve the relationship within these communities?
Excuse me. I think one, we need to focus on some of our common goals and kind of use that as a way to tear down some of the barriers between law enforcement and the community. We all have similar needs. You know, we all want to feel safe. We want to have good neighborhoods to raise our kids in. You know, some of the things that we've done, just you find out, like, police officers and deputies want to go home safe to their families at night. And citizens in the community, they want to go home and be safe. They want to be safe sitting on their porch, walking on the street. So those are some common things that we have. Then secondly, I think we need to get to a point where we're doing things that are non-enforcement activities, and that could be, you know, the coffee with a cop, those type of things. The sheriff's office just did a community barbecue where the sheriff's office provided games and toys and foods at Barnett Park in Pine Hills. And the whole point of that was just to say, hey, we like the same things. Yeah. We like to play games. We like to have fun. You know, there were some people out there dancing. We brought all our toys out. It's just like, hey, showing the community that we're people just like this.
Yeah.
There's no barrier there. So.
Hey, well, you know, Greg and my show, it's one of those shows that we like to make people uncomfortable and catch you off guard a little bit. And Chief Bernie,
Yeah.
I know because everybody probably has seen, it's sad, but it's famous, and it's unfortunately the truth. Chief Brown out of Dallas, Texas, when unfortunately he had 2 officers that were murdered, and during their funeral, he got up, and I mean, you can feel it from the heart, where he mentioned that the police are asking to do too much and to be everything for everybody. He talked about if there's stray dogs on the street, instead of calling animal control, you call the police. When we look at failing schools and communities, instead of our parents getting engaged, we call, unfortunately, the police. So with that, Chief Bernie, I want to ask you, what else can we do to further engage the community and some of these other entities that would be more apt or more responsible? Because as you know, when you look at that video of Chief Brown and he talks about not enough mental health funding, you call the police. So Chief, what's your take on how can we help balance what the police needs to do versus some of the other things that the community needs to get their arm around, but we also have other entities out there that need to get engaged?
Well, we found that there's so many resources that are available, but it's unfortunate that people are just unaware of them. And then on the other part of this is that when the resources are available, sometimes people want it brought to them instead of them going to it. And we're at a point that everybody wants their hand out, and now we're saying, no, you need to have a hand up and assist in this process. And when we talk about this, and I use a number of things as an example, every Tuesday in Fort Pierce we have what we call Courageous Kids. This is where we go to, it's a lower income area that's very high crime problematic in many ways, but we have families that live there that truly want all the things in life as anyone else. And we're with these kids every day, every Tuesday, because we're telling them that we will want them and they can be us. And it's that intertwining, and as we talk about, not only play games, but we talk about a number of issues. And we have the parents to come out to get them more involved as well. And as this continues to grow, and it starts out small, but just that voice, it continues. Because even when we engage the kids, it's amazing that many of the parents, they just don't know and don't understand. So we go and find ambassadors that are from the neighborhood, and as ambassadors, we give them the information and then they become our voice, meaning that what I might say to a resident, they might not accept, but if they have an use whatever tools to be successful.
Man.
And that, that sounds a lot like what Under Sheriff Canty was saying about how he grew up in the Pine Hills area, and then he wanted to come back and give back to the kids on the street. A little bit different from Chief McKinley, who grew up in a family of law enforcement. But does that sound a little bit about how you got into the ranks to where you are right now, Chief? Sheriff?
Absolutely. You see, you want to make an impact in your community, and if it doesn't have the resources that it needs, you got to go out and find them. Mm-hmm. It does make a lot of sense to have people in the community acting as those ambassadors, bringing those services back. Because a lot of times, like what you said, a lot of times they're not going to listen to what I say. We can say the exact same thing, but I don't have the same credibility and the same legitimacy in the community because of the uniform that I wear.
And even though you grew up there, you still have to redevelop or get someone to speak that language.
But that hits on another point, and Dr. Nelson, I've heard you do this presentation before, and I want you to chime in here, because we oftentimes hear people talk about diversity. And you know what? I'm all for diversity. But diversity don't mean a thing if you don't establish a relationship with the community that you're servicing, and vice versa. So Dr. Nelson, can you touch on the diversity issue? Well, we must have lost Dr. Nelson. Well, but
I'm here. The diversity issue for me, and I was telling Chief Hobley Bernie earlier today, is they gave me a cell phone in a bag, a handcuff, and a .357 revolver to go and supervise inmates that were being released from prison in the late 80s. And I had a white gentleman that was my partner, because you would have to do like round the clock. And I was born and raised in rural North Florida, dirt roads and trailers. And he was raised in Clearwater, but he spent most of his weekends in St. Petersburg, South St. Petersburg, playing basketball. He had a stronger connection with that community and the folk that we were supervising than I did. It was because it didn't have anything to do with black, white. He had established a relationship, and he understood the culture better than I did. So some of that is just that I think you have to, it doesn't matter black, white, blue, Jew or Gentile. Relationships is what it's about. And even with the uniform, at the university, it's very difficult for me to get students to want to go in law enforcement because what they see on television and some of the other things. But most of the minority folks and a lot of the non-minorities in law enforcement came into law enforcement because someone had a positive influence on them. So I still think whether you're in the uniform or out of the uniform, it's still about relationships, and that's not something that we do it a lot with defensive tactics, weaponry, and a lot of that, but very little in the academy in terms of developing not only law enforcement professionals but our students is about building relationships and being able to communicate. Because in this world of texting and everything else, the social skills are going to hell in a handbasket.
Let me ask this question, and Mr. Davis, I want to kind of throw this your way. I spent a lot of time in Jacksonville. My parents still live in Jacksonville. How has social media affected the way that police officers or law enforcement officers police?
I mean, good question. I mean, now with social media, information, images are instantly, disseminated. From the standpoint of how has it affected us policing, I think we're more conscious and aware that throughout our day-to-day interactions, at any time, any actions or any engagements we have could be posted on social media, but only with a segment of what really occurred. And when you have something that's posted, like that, and it goes to hundreds and thousands of followers, and they're all looking at this, then it does affect that perception of how law enforcement or how law enforcement officers engage with the public. So I think with us, we're aware of it. We keep it in the forefront of our minds, but we still move forward with under the premise, hey, we're going to treat people right and respectfully, and if we don't, then there are consequences that have to be paid. But it's I don't think it's just in Jacksonville. I think that's a question or an issue that's affecting law enforcement nationwide.
You're right.
Social media, how is social media affecting law enforcement? But take it back to Jacksonville. We have ongoing dialogue with our community and in various segments of the community. There are several civic leaders in our community that have direct access to the sheriff and a great deal of his command staff. So if things that are posted on social media are publicized and they have questions, then they'll contact us. And I've been personally contacted on numerous occasions about incidents that have occurred or been posted on social media, and I've taken a close look at it, and I've had a conversation with those, from those civic organizations and civil rights organizations that have called and say, hey, Director Davis, what can you tell us about this? And I'll take a look at it, and we'll have a candid conversation. And I'll tell them, hey, yeah, there's some things that we need to look at further, or no, there was nothing that was improper, done. So in that regard, there's always that other element that you're going to have to be prepared to address or respond to any actions that you've taken that have been posted on social media.
Right, and we're not going to always agree on the end result of how we need to handle things. Hey, on the line with us, and thanks, Director Davis. On the line with us, we have Pastor King. Pastor King, are you there?
Yes, thank you so very much for taking my call. One question, very quick. I need to know how will affordable housing and economic development curtail crime in our community or in the community?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a long time. Let's talk about let's talk about affordable housing. Yeah, listen, that's an outstanding question. Chief McKinley, you want to jump on that one?
Well, we've said it in some of the meetings that we've been in our community in South Apopka with y'all when we had the homicides and a couple weeks ago. When people are proud of their community and they have homes that they're proud of, and then they take ownership in their community, and I think it's important that we have that ownership. One of the things that Rod mentioned about our CRA initiative, it was and it still is to go through the neighborhood and try to improve the conditions. We can sit here and talk about crime and everything else, but if we don't get to some of the root causes, and some of the root causes are, how do you feel about your neighborhood? Are you proud about your neighborhood? As Under Sheriff Canty said, do you feel safe in your neighborhood? And everybody has a right to feel safe. Your kids should be able to go outside and play. You know, it comes down to lighting. It comes down to, you know, certain initiatives in the community to make that community a little bit safer. And again, if you can bring in affordable housing and it's quality housing and they feel good about their houses, then they're going to feel good about their community. They're going to interact with law enforcement. They're going to call law enforcement. You've heard me say it at numerous events. You know, 98% of the people in these communities are good people. It's a very small percentage that gives these communities the names that they have. And we need that relationship to build with the community to tell us what's going on in the community so that we can remove that small portion of the community and make that a safe community.
Well, with that, and I want to kind of hit some hard hitting issues, and this is to all law enforcement. One of the areas that I learned from you guys was CompStat. And CompStat, in placing your limited resources in communities that you know based on data is some of your biggest problems. And strategically looking at how do you align your limited resources in those communities. So with that being said, on one hand, I want to commend what Orange County government is presently doing with its youth and family services dollars, where Orange County has 53 zip codes. Out of the 53 zip codes, there's 9 zip codes that produce over, and Dr. Nelson is a better statistician to give you this information than me, but over 65% of all the juvenile arrests, over 60% of all the dependency issues with children being removed from homes and abuse and neglect issues. But then you also, this is a sad commentary from just a crime perspective, you have over 65% of those same folk that you go to Orange County Jail and they live in these various communities. So with that being said, you know, Orange County is doing something innovative, but something that I don't know that's taking place throughout the rest of the state using CompStat. What would any of you say is your biggest challenge in law enforcement right now? Working with the communities that we're talking about.
I think some of it is kind of allocating our resources. We obviously, I think we have enough deputies to police the county, but as crime grows and expands, you want to be able to send the resources right away and not wait for a week or 2 weeks. And one of the things we've done at the Orange County Sheriff's Office is we took some of our proactive units that were centralized and under one chain of command that kind of oversaw the entire county, and we took those units, split them up, and gave them back to the sector captain. So the sector captain, he's in touch with the community. He knows what's going on. He's attended all the community meetings. So giving him the ability to take some of his resources by adding those units to him, and now on a day-to-day, hourly basis, he can move officers or deputies to where he needs them right away, and not wait until crime gets so bad that it kind of triggers our numbers.
Mm-hmm.
He can see it by just reading the reports and talking to the citizens. Hey, I know I'm starting to have a spike. So before it even gets to the point where it gets to the senior staff, he's able to start moving and trying.
Being proactive with your resources.
Exactly.
Okay.
So.
Chief McKinley, anything on that note? Because we're going to go right down the list on this one.
Well, and we do the same thing. We, look at every Monday, our crime analyst puts out our statistics as to where crime is occurring, where it occurred the week before, what our numbers are, so that we can redirect our resources. But it's also about, we need to break down the barriers with the community. They need to understand, law enforcement, as you mentioned, has gone well past the realm of what it was initially created to do, and that was enforce the laws in, across the country. Now we're social services, psychologists, and everything else. What that creates is a police officer who is stressed because they're trying to figure out, nobody comes into this career not wanting to help somebody in our community. But then you try to figure out, how do I help them and how do I get them the resources they need? And then you see the same people over and over that you've tried to provide resources to, and it becomes very stressful. They have a very stressful job. And sometimes the community doesn't understand the stress factors that the law enforcement agency or officers are under. And sometimes we don't understand, like I mentioned earlier, the root causes of what's going on in the community to create some of those. So we got to break down those barriers and some of the things we talked about. I know that, Mayor Nelson, we got Alonzo Williams Park.
Yes.
That's going to be built in the very near future. It'll be done. We're going to have some kickball tournaments in there. We spent some of our forfeiture funds to buy a mobile movie screen where we can do movies in each one of our parks throughout the community in the future. Bring the community together, interact with law enforcement, the fire department, the community, maybe bring in, Advent Health to bring in some of the services they provide and so forth.
But you're telling us about some great things that's taking place, but I want to also refer back to what Chief Bernie said a few minutes ago. There's resources out there. I mean, as limited as some of them might be, but we have to have people that want to utilize these resources.
Right, and you've got to have people that want to come to the events too. And one of the things that I was going to say was, like at our kickball tournament, or if we have one in Alonzo Williams Park, or the movie theaters, that's an opportunity for our community and our businesses to come together with the hospital to show some of the things that they have and the services that they can provide. Orange County Government Services have some of those booths there to show the community what the services are. We recently got a video from the Victim Service Center at the police department so that I can show all of our officers. I used to be on the board of directors for the Victim Service Center. And so all of our officers now can be aware of what services the Victim Service Center provides in our community and can refer people back to them, crime victims, to get funding and so forth, and all the services that are out there and available to them.
Listen, it seems as if we have another call on the line. Caller, you're on live with Brother Love and Greg Jackson. Let's talk about it. How you doing this evening?
Good evening. How are you? How are you guys doing?
Doing good. Well, it seems as if you called at a good time. We have law enforcement representatives from various parts of Orange County and City of Apopka, as well as Fort Pierce and Jacksonville. You have a question for them tonight?
I do. I have a son that, to say he's being bullied doesn't even begin to compare to what he's being, having done to him. And I know here in Apopka, the main problem that we face is that the city and the county lines are so misconstrued. I mean, you can be on one particular street, but depending on if you're on the left side, you may be in the city. And then if you're on the right side, you're in the county. And so that gets very frustrating when you're trying to call for help, especially with these, the young boys around here. And especially here in South Dakota, it's the same group of young boys. And it's not as if the police are not, aware of who they are and what they do. But the frustrating part is you may have some with the APD. They really do. They want to help, and you can tell because they're frustrated. But the bigger picture is, and especially with Orange County, they drop the ball or they just tell you flat out, no, we're not going to get involved. Decide, which cases you're going to work and you're not. How can we keep this community safe if you all are going to work with us, And that's another problem. They love to say, oh, the community don't want to help. Oh, they see stuff and don't want to say anything. And that's absolutely false. Around here, names, they're giving addresses, and nothing's being done about it. And it's very frustrating, especially for my son, who doesn't hang in the streets.
Well, I'll tell you what, I want you to do two things for us. I want you not to hang up because this show is about results, and if you want, I want to get your contact information so I can work with Orange County Sheriff's Office and APD. But in relationship to something else that you said, I heard Under Sheriff Canty address this at the Community Emergency Response meeting that we had when we heard numerous citizens that had a couple of issues, and it was outside of the boundaries of operating procedure. And so, Under Sheriff Canty, if you would, I want you to respond to that piece of it.
I mean, our job is to respond and to provide assistance to our citizens. And sometimes there are jurisdictional boundaries and things we can and can't do. But I will tell you that if one of my deputies comes out and they're not giving you the level of service that you desire, then the first thing you need to do is call for a supervisor. And that's usually a corporal or sergeant. And if that corporal or sergeant doesn't give you the satisfaction that you desire, then you call for a watch commander, who's a lieutenant. And it can go all the way up to where you call for a lieutenant, you call for the sector captain.
As a process.
As a process. And that way, when it gets to me, and it should never really get to me because they should all be handling it. And if it does get to me, there's going to be some other conversations that I'll have. But if it gets to me, then it's a discussion that I'm going to have. First, I'm going to try to fix your problem. And I may not be able to handle it specifically because it may be outside of my jurisdiction, but I'm going to help provide you the resources that you need to get it handled. And if it is my responsibility, my agency's responsibility, and I have multiple people that are not handling it, there will be discussion between them and I about what their job is and how they're supposed to handle things. So there's always a process. Everybody works for somebody. So if you're not getting the satisfaction, you just kind of escalate, go move up the chain of command until you get the desired, the direction you desire.
Okay, caller, if you would, I would like for you to hold on the line. Armando's going to get your information because we want to get some resolution to your issue. And before,
I would appreciate that.
thank you very much. So hold the line, and Armando will get your contact information. One of the other things before this show expires, we continue to have conversations about trying to get justice on the side of the road. And if we don't emphasize anything else during this broadcast, I want to emphasize not just the young people, but to anybody. If you have that engagement with law enforcement, traffic stop or anything, don't expect to get justice on the side of the road. As you mentioned before, there's processes. If you don't like the way you're being treated, there's a process to file a complaint. But please, whatever you do, don't be on the side of the road thinking that you're going to hold court there because it hasn't turned out. Whether you agree or disagree with the outcome, that's something that we need to particularly teach our young males because that's what we're seeing a great deal of in these social media, so whether folk agree with how things transpired or not, I want our young folk to be able to come home at night and let's go ahead and deal with it through the process.
Well, but one of the other things too, and as time rolls down, I want to see if any of the other law enforcement officers have had this issue, is that there are a number of people that are saying that the issues that are happening in the schools are now starting to spill over into homes or into people's neighborhoods, and things that are happening in the neighborhoods are spilling over into the schools. Are there any ways that that parents or law enforcement can work together so when there is bullying in the school, because that's one of the things I wrote down, when there's bullying in the school that spills over into someone's home, who is the best person to handle that? Is that a school issue or is that a law enforcement issue?
Good question.
I think it's both. Both. The parents have to be engaged, and I think we talked earlier about getting to the root cause of what is really occurring, and a lot of that is our parents aren't engaged as much as they should be, as much as our parents were in our school, our sports, where we're at. We're at, I think, the first meeting we had when we had the homicides up in Apopka, and I was asked about creating a curfew in the city of Apopka. And a curfew at 10 o'clock at night is not going to solve our problem. They should know where their kids are at 10 o'clock at night. It should not be a matter of me trying to arrest our way out of crime, especially with our juveniles, because their parents don't know where they're at. And I think we all come from Christian backgrounds, agree that our morals in society are sort of slipping too.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get our morals up, but we've got to have those parents engaged. And I think you see the engagement different at different schools throughout Orange County. But if you're engaged and you stay on top of it, same with somebody when doesn't get the service that they expect. You stay and you demand something, you're eventually going to get what you want. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And I'm a big believer when I talk to all the Apopka police officers that sometimes we forget that people don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to call the Apopka Police Department for giggles.
That's true.
They're in a crisis when they call law enforcement, whether it be the sheriff's office, the police department, or whatever. To them, they're in a crisis. It may not be a crisis to us, but to them it is. And we need to remember that they think they're in a crisis, and we need to treat it like a crisis and provide them with the best service we can to help them through that crisis, regardless of whatever it is.
Right, Chief. Hey, well, as we continue to wind down, Amanda, do we have any other callers on the line? Here's something that we definitely need to do, and I want to start it off with Chief Bernie. Chief Bernie, if you had to give some insight as to the conversation regarding community engagement, what would you leave the listening audience with?
With community engagement, it's all about really in the heart, because with everything that I have my officers to do, I don't mandate anything. When it comes to community engagement, they volunteer because they care about their neighborhood and they care about our citizens, because people know when you are real. And what also occurs is, and when I feel the agony and the pain of the lady caller that called in, that there is no boundaries. And these officers, they understand that regardless of whatever the situation is, I don't care whether it's the county or the city, if someone is calling help them, and they can refer a report later. Because if as you said before, when people are in need, we have to assist. And lastly, when it comes to community engagement, like with our search warrants, I'm going to use this as an example. Every time we do a search warrant, we do a neighborhood canvas. We're going door to door to say, this is what we got out of this house, or this drugs. These are the people that we arrested, and it's because we're taking back, we're making your neighborhood safe. And although the doors get slammed in our face sometimes, don't care about that. Behind that closed door, they're jumping for joy because we are taking care of the issue. And because we are engaged that way, then the people are talking and they are telling us more because they want their children to play, not only for today, but for the tomorrows as well.
Hey, well, thanks, Chief Bernie. Director Davis.
Yes. If I'd have to lay two things, or a couple of things, one would be from the community side. It has to be ongoing. You have to take ownership of your neighborhood, as I think Chief said earlier, or the undersheriff. 98% of the people that live in these communities are good, honest, hard-working people. They want safe neighborhoods. When they invested in homes in these neighborhoods, they didn't invest in these homes to be inundated with crime and despair. They wanted a safe neighborhood for their families, so they could raise their families and they could grow old. And somewhere along the way, we've allowed a small percentage of individuals to come in and take that. Well, to the community, we've got to take that back, and that means staying engaged, being involved, communicating, not with just the law enforcement officials, but with the elected officials. From a law enforcement side, you need to understand that most of the people that live in these neighborhoods, they want a safe neighborhood just like we want a safe neighborhood for our family. And most of these people that live in these neighborhoods, they don't have the financial resources to move or relocate. They call on us for help. And when we decided, hey, we wanted to become law enforcement officers, that's, I think, why most of us said we wanted to be law enforcement officers, so we could help. So we need to help. We need to be willing to take that extra step. And if it's a situation that's beyond law enforcement's capability, then help direct them to the right resources. Don't just say, well, it's not a police problem and move on, to the next call. They're calling you for help. So help refer them to the correct, services so they can get the help that they need. But it has to be ongoing. It has to be a daily focus of law enforcement and the community, and that's communicating and working together and understanding that we all want the same thing. We want a safe neighborhood for our families.
Well, thank you, Director Davis. Chief McKinley, I'm going to ask you to give us your thoughts about our community engagement, but also before I do that, Greg and I have just been, private messages, I'm learning this technology stuff, and one of the fathers that spoke at the community emergency response meeting, whose son was murdered, he just piped in saying, this is the kind of conversation that we need to continuously have, and segued off what you said, Undersheriff. Let's not wait till it gets bad to engage. Let's continue these conversations. But Chief McKinley, if you would, what's your thoughts about where do we go from here as it relates to continuing to develop this engagement, but at the same time, law enforcement can't do it all?
Right, and I think it comes back to what I said earlier is, it's great to engage when we've had a crisis, when we've had 3 or 4 homicides in a community, and bring the community together and everybody shows up, but then we have 3 or 4 meetings and, it's all of us just sitting around the room. We got to keep that engagement if there's not a crisis.
Yeah.
And it involves not only the City of Apopka government, the police department, Orange County Sheriff's Office, getting out in our communities, having our kickball tournaments, interacting, having a team in the kickball tournament to interact and show them that, we can be athletes sometimes too. Not at my age, but at some of the younger ages, and have the movie in the park and let them come into the community, feel safe, relaxed, interact with us. But it's an engagement that we have to have 365 days a year. But if the community doesn't show up to these events, we can put on all kinds of events, no matter what we want to do. We can go door to door, and as the chief said earlier, if we get the door slammed in our face, that's not going to build these relationships that we need to build to make the community safe and break these barriers so that we can do what we need to do.
Well, Chief, appreciate that. Greg, you go ahead and co-host.
Listen, I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm a spectator tonight, but more particularly because Chief McKinley and I have disagreed on some things. But it's one thing about Chief McKinley that I will always say is that I never question his heart for the community.
Right.
And when Chief McKinley says this is what we're doing, this is how we're looking to build a great community, I believe it, because even in our disagreements, we agree that it's about building stronger communities and things of that nature.
And we always agree. If we go into a room and always agree and come out and we get the same results, something ain't right.
Right. But that's how you grow.
Exactly.
That's how our relationship has grown stronger, because we know that we can disagree and then come back and still shake hands and say, hey, let's keep working together to make something great in this community.
And I'll be holding back that Tallahassee.
And I know Under Sheriff Canton and I haven't butted heads, but I know that from seeing him at the community meeting, when things happen in the community, he stands up and he says, that's not what we are about, and this is how we're going to make it better. So that's what I respect about everyone that I hear on the phone, is that everyone is saying, we want our communities to be better, and this is how we're going to do it. Now, can I stop talking?
Hey, Sheriff, I'm going to interpret that for you. Greg looks forward to working with you, but he's looking forward to disagreeing with you. Hey, but Under Sheriff, can you give us your thoughts on community engagement?
Yeah, I think law enforcement is probably one of the few professions that we don't define our own image. Historically, law enforcement has been the arm of the government, and sometimes that's been good. A lot of times that's been bad, particularly in the African American community. And I think over the years, we have failed to sell ourselves and tell people, hey, what you saw on TV last week, or what happened, 70 years ago, is not the same police department, the same sheriff's office. Mm-hmm. And to kind of go back to the social media thing, I think a lot of that is negative, and the media uses it to kind of put out some of the stories that are kind of sensationalized, and then get a lot of viewers. But what we've started to do is use it to tell our story, tell what we're about, tell the good things that we're doing, tell it when an officer or a deputy gets out and they help an elderly person cross the street, or they cut their grass, or they fix their toilet, and all that stuff. That's true. Those are true stories. So we use it to tell our story. And I think one of the things that we've done at the sheriff's office is told our deputies, like, hey, every day you should be. What I actually told them, some supervisors this morning, is I told them every day you should be trying to get better. Mm-hmm. That's just your one job. But on top of that is every day you should be trying to impact somebody's life positively. Whether you wave to them, you roll down your window, you smile at them, you get out of your car, you play football or basketball with kids. When you do that type of stuff, no one sees you. There's the news media is not following you around with the camera, but that makes a definite impact on the kid. When you have a little kid, a little 5-year-old that runs up to you and hugs your leg because you play baseball or basketball with them for 30 seconds, for 2 minutes,
it makes a difference.
That makes a difference. And that is the type of things that law enforcement agencies are doing across the country, but that doesn't sell. Right. And we have to sell it. We have to tell the community, this is what we're about, and here we are. We're here. Like we all live different places, but the time that I'm at work and I'm in the community, that is my community, and I have a vested interest in that community.
And I have to say this because Greg and I have heard this.
Y'all got to excuse
him on that.
That was right on time.
Hey, but to all our law enforcement that's here tonight, Chief Birdie, Director Davis, Chief McKinley, and also Under Sheriff. Here's something that I want to also leave you with, as well as the law enforcement that's going to be watching this. And here's one of those gut checks, if you would. What we oftentimes hear from the community is the same level that the community is held accountable for when it makes mistakes. That's the same level we expect law enforcement to hold itself accountable, because law enforcement is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And what I've seen with Broward County Sheriff Tony, with the incident that we've seen with the young kid that, you know, we don't know what took place on the beginning or the well, we saw the end, but to see the chief executive of law enforcement go out and not, you know, when we talk about transparency, go out in front of the cameras and basically say, hey, look, we're not going to hide anything, we're not going to cover anything up, we're going to be transparent, we're going to look at this and we're going to look at it hard. That's what the community also wants to hear from law enforcement, because we're going to make mistakes on both sides, but we need to make sure that it's transparent and that everybody's held accountable as well.
Agree.
So, do we have somebody? Well, you know I can't hear you, brother.
I was just saying, so Dr. Nelson hadn't had a chance to
Oh,
chime
yeah,
in with his with his final thoughts on things.
Dr. Nelson.
You guys did an excellent job, and I think Rod summed it up at the end. At the end of the day, law enforcement has the legal authority to take someone's life, liberty, under the guise of the law. They should be held to a higher standard. That standard just can't be the Jesus Christ standard. And when they make a mistake, they have to own up to it. Same way in the community. I think when we talk about two-way accountability, it's law enforcement. There are folk in law enforcement and students at university that I won't allow. We have to do a better job of being gatekeepers of this noble profession.
Well, Dr. Nelson, we definitely appreciate you, and we know that through Bethune-Cookman University, and you also facilitate law enforcement recruitment through all of the HBCUs. Can you just mention that real quick?
Oh, absolutely. I told our students are like college athletes. If you're bright, you're willing to go in and help your community. We have law enforcement agents from across the state, and they call on a daily basis looking for students at Florida A&M, Bethune-Cookman, Edward Wharton, and Florida Memorial University, and we have some excellent students. But as I said before, law enforcement isn't for everyone. So we just, even at the universities, we need to be gatekeepers. There are some students that are not, this isn't the profession for them, and we need to be honest and say that. And law enforcement needs to be honest when folks are coming in and saying, this isn't the profession for you. And I think that that'll do some of the pruning out of those, because just like we say, there are only a few bad apples in the community, is the same way in law enforcement. There's a few bad apples, but something can happen in Timbuktu, North Dakota, but you'll feel the winds, law enforcement will feel the winds in the park and Duval County as well as Fort Pierce. So some of that, I think we have to be better gatekeepers just in case, and have chips in the bank. Chips in the bank that we have relationships in our community, so when they do see something on television, hey, that's not here. I know our law enforcement community here.
You're right.
They're engaged. We have relationships. So it is a building process. This process, it didn't get here overnight. It won't be fixed overnight.
Dr. Nelson, thank you. Appreciate it. I want to just go ahead and give my closing thoughts very quickly, and that is, you know what? It comes down to leadership. Chief Burney, Director Davis, Chief McKinley, and Under Sheriff Canty. Let me say to each of you, and Dr. Nelson, thank you for being here, but you know what takes place out there in the community, we are very appreciative that we have you in leadership positions, because everything's not going to always go right. And like Dr. Nelson said about using your chips, that's when you're going to need to use those chips. And the community leaders, as you develop those relationships, that's when we'll be standing behind you when things don't go right. But we also are going to continue to support you, but expect a level of accountability. I ran the 4x4, and I'm used to passing the baton, and I'm going to pass the baton to my good friend Greg Jackson to go ahead and give his closing thoughts.
No, you didn't run the 4x4, you ran the 440.
Oh.
We ran yards back when we were growing up. We didn't run meters. We didn't run meters. We ran yards.
Okay.
No, listen, with all jokes aside, I mean, I want to say I appreciate everyone who came, who tuned in to the call, and especially the law enforcement officers, the law enforcement professionals such as Dr. Randy B. Nelson, who joined us in the conversation. As I always say, in order to do better, you must know better.
Right.
And the conversation tonight helps us to understand what our law enforcement friends have to deal with and what they have to do. And I don't know how many people have done this. I know that you've done it. But I don't know how many people have actually done a ride along with the law enforcement officer, and not in the daytime when everything is bright and sunny and things like that, but between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. in the morning. If you go and you ride with the law enforcement officer, you will have a greater appreciation for what they do in keeping our community safe. And so we have to get behind and support those who are keeping our community safe. But in the same respect as Dr. Nelson was saying, they have a great responsibility to do their duties in such a way that we can trust them. I trust law enforcement because I see what they do, I know what they do, and it is a great task.
Trust is the key, my brother.
Yeah, it is a great task they undertake, whether it is a young rookie police officer to an undersheriff to a chief to a director of policing services. They have a great responsibility, and we have to understand that they're here to help keep us safe. But in the same respect, as we were saying, they have a responsibility to us as well.
And because we know about the local leadership, I mean, I couldn't, close us out with mentioning Mayor Nelson, Mayor of the City of Apopka, but we also have Sheriff Mina, who's, just jumped in there, man, and with both feet. So it's about relationship building, it's about trust. And at the end of the day, with our guests that are here, Greg and I have a little old saying, and y'all will catch on real quick. You don't have to go home,
but you got to get out of here.
Hey, until next week, we'll see you on Let's Talk Nation. Hey, Let's Talk Nation, we want to thank everybody for participating in this process. And this conversation doesn't stop here. Want to thank law enforcement once again, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place.